Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have had a wonderful few days since I last saw you. Today, I shall have for you my new and updated transfer plans following the progression of both Newcastle and Liverpool to the EFL Cup final. To accompany those transfer plans, I have a deeper look into Unai Emery and whether we should be buying him, a slightly different perspective on the table bonus, alongside the other managers and whether they actually might be better prospects than Unai Emery, even though they have single game weeks this time around. I'll also be looking at Aston Villa assets, including Ollie Watkins in a little bit of depth, as well as showcasing my team all the way until Game Week 34 with some insights into Wildcard 35 to show you what chip strategies could potentially benefit you and whereabouts you could gain and lose with certain chip strategies, and giving you a more practical example showcasing my team each step of the way. For those of you who watch regularly, I greatly appreciate it. But if you could subscribe, if you're one of the thousands who do watch regularly but have not, I would be greatly appreciative. Likewise, if you're new around here, consider clicking the button as well as we push for 7,000 subscribers. You have been so brilliant with the like count on recent videos. So if we go for 450 on this as well, that would be superb. But without anything else needing to be said, let's get into the video. To commence the discussion about the assistant manager challenge that we faced this week, let us not start with Unai Emery, but rather the man in the opposing corner on the Saturday just gone at Molineux, Vitor Pereira. So why do I start with him? Well, let's take the example from the weekend, and then we will move on to how this applies to Unai Emery in double game week 25. Vitor Pereira scored 19 points, right? And if you went there, congratulations. In a direct sense, however, there was minimal downside because no one went for Unai Emery, not really at least, right? So if you were to go for Vitor Pereira and he was to lose, you wouldn't be getting hurt both ways. You wouldn't be missing out on points, and at the same time, your competitors wouldn't be gaining as well. Now, yes, David Moyes did fantastically well, and so did Arne Slot, but I'm talking about the direct relationship here, which I would say increases downside where it is present. Now, let's look at Unai Emery in double game week 25. If he is to lose, and let's just say best case for them, they lose 2-1, right, in terms of the losses that are possible, because they could lose 20-0, but let's just say they lose 2-1, he will finish on 1 point. And Arne Slot will finish on 8, which means there's roughly a 7-point downside as the minimum on the assumption that they lose. Even if they draw, which is a very good result for Aston Villa, a very good result, especially with the form that Liverpool are in, there's only going to be a 5-point difference. They'll get the same amount for the goal scored, slash if it's a 0-0, the clean sheet. Arne Slot will get 3. Unai Emery will get 3, plus the 5 table bonus, so 8. But it's still just a 5-point difference. So the only real upside there for Unai Emery in this particular game week, I would say, over Arne Slot specifically, and we'll come to the rest of the managers in a second, is if they can go and beat Liverpool. But for me, the likelihood of that is quite small at the moment. Now, I'm going to assume that they beat Ipswich, but I'm not going to assume that they blow them away. I'll just say like a 3-1, right? So he finishes on 9 points. The defense isn't particularly strong at the moment. Yes, Disasi's come in, but he hasn't been so great for Chelsea. It's a new arrival. It might take time to settle in. They've got a few injuries at the moment. So I will say that Ipswich score and it ends 3-1. Well, he finishes on 9 points, and then he doesn't do so well against Liverpool, and they do draw. That's a 1-pointer, right? 10-pointer. But even if he was to draw, we'll give him what? 8 points-ish? Right, so he finishes on 16-17, which appears to be quite decent. However, that is all on the assumption that you have strong conviction that he, at bare minimum, gets a draw. But realistically, you have to have some conviction he can win. Otherwise, the upside is quite limited, right? And let's move on to other single game week managers, aside from Arne Slot, who has a double game week, to express my point where you don't necessarily need to go there. If you were confident, if you were really confident that Liverpool beat Aston Villa, which I think is a very fair assumption to make, given Villa's form and given how well Liverpool are playing in particular, right? That's where the focus should be for me. And you are fairly confident that Fulham could beat Nottingham Forest, and it's very unlikely that they lose to you, that you could just see at a minimum they get a draw. But then the floor is around 10. The maximum you'll be losing on Unai Emery compared to the people who had a relatively strong conviction about him winning, the assumption they don't, is about 7-8 points, which really isn't too bad. Whereas here, you could get a 20-pointer if Fulham win, especially if you have strong conviction. It's very difficult to have that about Unai Emery going into the Liverpool game for them to win. Obviously, if they do, it's absolutely great, and you are maximizing your upside and you're capturing it. But if you really don't fancy it, because I know some managers don't, I don't think going for a single game week manager for the reasons I've discussed is so bad, because the floor, I feel like, is significantly higher if you obviously view Fulham in that way. And maybe you don't. Maybe you view Brighton versus Chelsea in a way where you just can't see Brighton losing, right? In that case, again, the floor is at 10. And same with Graham Potter at home to Brentford. I quite like that. The table bonus will be present for that if Everton get some points off Liverpool, which may be a instigator to actually get on Unai Emery and just hope for a little bit of a Liverpool drop-off. But that remains to be seen. This isn't bulletproof because you could just assume that, like, oh, Villa have a chance and you're happy to lose the 7-8 points and you'll gamble for that 20. But if you view it in a different way, if you really do view Liverpool having a very strong chance of going to Aston Villa and beating them, then honestly, I think it makes a lot of sense if you have conviction in any of the three, of Marco Silva and Hertzler or Potter, to go there, just to ensure that you still have some upside and realistic upside present. Let us now move on to Aston Villa assets for the double. I'm just going to assume you're Morgan Rogers, and if you don't, I still think he's the best one. I mean, he'll have the best minutes. He'll probably just play 90-90. The schedule isn't too intense around this period, given they qualified in the top 8 of the Champions League, so they don't have to play the playoffs. And Unai Emery loves him. He plays a good position. I don't think he'll be playing on the right side too much anymore, at least. So for me, Morgan Rogers, the best. But a lot of us own him, and as such, I thought we'll just discuss the rest. I will say one thing, considering what I've said previously about Aston Villa. You can, of course, have the view that you think they are going to beat Liverpool, or even have a small chance of beating Liverpool, higher than maybe what the bookies make it out to be, or the market odds, just I know a lot of people follow that. For me, for example, when you get to the bit where I'm showcasing my team, I'm very much in favour, to an extent, of getting Emery for the purpose of the extra game, and because I see Aston Villa beating Ipswich. The thing with them beating Ipswich is I'm not sure that they're going to keep a clean sheet, and losing that 2 points in this scenario is actually quite a big deal to me. And as such, I'm a little bit more worried, but we'll come on to that in a second. If Ollie Watkins is fit, he's a brilliant prospect. 2 games at home, expected minutes should be good on the assumption he's fit. If he's completely fit, they'll be great. They'll just be 90-90. And especially considering the nature of the Liverpool game, the fact that it is such a big game, the fact that they don't have another number 9. Yeah, sure, Rashford could come up there, play some minutes, so could Marlon. But I feel like if Watkins is fit, he'll give him the whole game, especially now that John Duran's gone, and Watkins probably hasn't had the minutes he would like this season. He would have liked to stay on the pitch a lot longer compared to the substitute performances he's had. One of the few strikers I do genuinely think, with his movement in particular, his threat on transition, his intelligence, that could cause Van Dijk and Konate some problems, and the quality that's surrounding him, on the assumption they just have a good day. Rodgers, maybe to an extent, although I haven't been particularly impressed this season. Asensio, iffy shot. Marlon, iffy shot. Rashford, iffy shot. Ramsey, who has got significant minutes under his belt, and then Tielemans, obviously, for example, against Manchester City, in a game which was slightly more open for transitions for Villa, which Liverpool will be to an extent, not the same extent as City, but to an extent, did wonderfully well in that game. Obviously, John Duran started, but that's not the point, right? It's just the fact that they'll have the surrounded quality in Tielemans. So I think if you want to go here, there's very little to actually go and critique it, unless you're really gambling with the expected minutes. The only real critique can be the practical application. If you have to rip up your team to get him, is it worth it? Well, you have to go and plan your team down the line and see how these transfers impact you, because they will have a massive impact, not just for Game Week 25, but all the way until Game Week 38. They could well change your route. Because now imagine you are faced with an issue or a challenge where down the line you'll have one less free transfer because you've got Ollie Watkins now. Maybe that deters you from taking the hit and making the same move you would have done if you had the transfer, and your whole season changes as a result. That's honestly quite a realistic thing as well. If you consider it, you'd make a lot more moves if you had a lot more transfers, right? Which isn't actually always rational. And one day I will speak about why I do think hits are going to become more and more optimal. That is for another day, right? So go and plan it. One of the routes to Ollie Watkins, and I guess the easiest route for everyone, is to sell Alexander Isak. But do you really want to sell Isak? Especially if you're looking at free at 29 and you see a lot of upside associated there. Well, then you're not going to have Watkins for 30 and beyond. Potentially, you're not going to have, well, I guess your wildcard in 30, right? You're not going to have him in 28, though. You're not going to have him for City away. And you know what? City away, stylistically, at the moment, is a wonderful game for him. Honestly, there might not be a better player to have City away than Alexander Isak right now. So that's something to consider. And then he's just world-class and in form as well, right? Bit of a dangerous sell. And then would you take a hit for Ollie Watkins? Well, then you've got to weigh up that for yourself and assess his prospects. So I think it's very much down to the practical application of this move, as opposed to assessing Ollie Watkins' prospects, because for me, if the expected minutes are solid, they are brilliant prospects for this double game week. The other assets, I'm really just not a fan. The defenders, I think, are a huge risk, not just because of the fixtures they have coming up. But like I said, every transfer now is so important. Also so important. And I don't think it's the most efficient usage. I also don't think there's a high ceiling associated with it. And thus, for me, it's not really worth it. Like, at least if you're going to take a big risk, I want to be able to win big. And yeah, you know what? Sure, they could haul against Ipswich, but you don't even know necessarily who's going to start outside of Conser. And Ipswich have a goal in them. They've got enough firepower in their attack. And Ciso, Hutchinson, Philogene, and of course, Mr. Liam Delap himself. So for me, no. Rashford and Asensio, they've just had a real lack of game time this season. And they haven't played too much recently. So their expected minutes at the moment are probably quite low. Maybe one start and one bench appearance, but you're not going past like 115 minutes. I imagine, roughly. Maybe a little bit more, but they probably won't be in their sharpest form. And then Marlon, he's interesting because he's someone I look at and I think, you know what, if you had a good expected minutes, I could really get on board with this because he's got goals in him. 13 goals in 27 Bundesliga appearances last year is no joke. That's very good. And I've seen some of the goals he's got. Sharp player. Even in the Champions League, some good performances. So, for me, I don't think this is the worst risk in the world to take on the assumption that there is good expected minutes. Ollie Watkins, by the way, is meant to be back about 4 days before the Ipswich game. It should give him enough time, I feel like, to get up to scratch, get around 75 minutes for Ipswich, and then at least 80 for Liverpool, right? Losing 10, 15 minutes. It isn't the end of the world. And I feel like if they're in a real battle with Liverpool, he can stay on anyway. But let's just say for whatever reason, he's not there. And Marlon is almost guaranteed to play number 9. We will learn on Sunday what Villa look like with their new signings to an extent, given they have Spurs at home and they'll probably have to go quite strong for that, given it's a tough game. So we'll learn a lot there. But Marlon is someone I would have on the radar. And out of all of the other assets, aside from Rodgers and Watkins, he'd be the one I'd be looking. So that is an overview of how I interpret the value of Unai Emery, other managers, and Aston Villa assets going into Double Gameweek 25. But beforehand, I will of course look at everything in more depth and other variables, including maybe whether you should shift Liverpool assets should you be in a particular situation. Like, who knows, maybe you own Trent. And I'll look at that all in everything you need to know and solving your problems and my team selection before the commencement of Double Gameweek 25. However, moving to my own team, what routes do I have? Well, realistically, there's 2. Maybe you could argue 3. The first one would be the plan primarily for Ollie Watkins and to bet on Aston Villa. I would be getting Unai Emery, I would be getting Ollie Watkins and Dango Otara in place for David Moyes, Johan Wissa and Phil Foden. This would mean that I take a -4 and bench Anthony Gordon. Why Dango over Cliver? Well, solely for monetary reasons. If I didn't, I wouldn't have the money to potentially upgrade Unai Emery to Pep Guardiola in Game Week 26 to capture the potential table bonus that might be an offer should Newcastle beat them, or if some other results fall the way where Manchester City would move to 6th. Why do I want that? Because there's more upside associated in a particular game week for a manager with table bonus than there are for players, and as such, I just want to keep myself open to that. That would be route A. Now, if Dango was Cliver, I'd probably be far more inclined to go there, but I really would prefer Cliver, especially given this is a long-term hold. And benching Anthony Gordon away to Manchester City, especially after his goal against Arsenal and the way they played, and the fact that I think they could have a good performance again, it doesn't feel so great. Option 2, B, would be to simply move David Moyes to Marco Silva and Foden to Clive. So I get my preference over the Bournemouth mids. I get to start Anthony Gordon, which I will be happy with. And you know what? It'd be particularly enjoyable just for my team in terms of a competitive standpoint if people were to sell Alexander Isak, and I would have both Gordon and Isak in a high upside fixture, given the stylistic nature to it, as some form of a differential, right? Considering what their EO should be or could be for the quality of players that they are, right? This would basically mean I bet against Aston Villa. I just back Liverpool to get the job done, / I back Marco Silva to do much better than Unai Emery in this double game week. And I'm comfortable going with Morgan Rodgers. And that's about it. And then C is doing the same thing, but instead of going for Silva, going for Emery, assuming they beat Ipswich, not being so bullish on Fulham, and then just kind of hoping they pull something off against Liverpool. Or who knows, maybe I get really bullish on Villa, but I just think that Ollie Watkins and no one else is worth it. And whatever happens there, I trust my players can cover it. For example, Gordon, and of course, I don't take a hit. So I would love to hear your suggestions. Maybe you found another route with my team. I currently have 2 free transfers and 0.0 in the bank. So do let me know. I'll tell you what I'm favouring in a second. But essentially, we can set up an equation and then decide from there. It really is just Watkins plus Dango plus Emery versus Gordon plus Cliver plus 4 points and then plus Silva / Emery, dependent on whether I choose B, or C. Right now, I am leaning towards the Gordon version. Not so much just for this game week, more so what it does down the line. I trust Clive more than I do Dango. I like having the fact that I get the 4 points in the bank, but obviously, even if I were to pick Emery on both sides, I still get that extra game with Ollie Watkins. I think Clive here for me is a big deal given it's a long-term hold, and there's just something about Anthony Gordon at the moment where I don't feel entirely comfortable benching him. So now let's see how this looks all the way until game week 34. And in advance, I haven't shown you the Watkins version, which is slightly harder to navigate for my team. But of course, should I choose to go down that route, I will naturally show you in team selection. So let's jump in and let's go week by week. The reason that Johan Wissa was not included in that equation was due to the fact that regardless, I'll either sell him for Ollie Watkins and he won't be in the starting 11, or I will bench him for the players you've seen on screen. I think going away to West Ham will be tough. I think you saw that Potter has so far been able to find solutions to teams. I'm sure Brentford will be no different. Whether it's successful or not is another thing entirely, but I'm sure he will find some solution that he thinks is certainly worthy of being put out for a Premier League game. And you saw that they were relatively compact against Chelsea. They've got a physical defence to an extent. I think they really need a certain type of 6 profile in midfield, and it would help them exponentially. But at the moment, they're still okay in a defense from a defensive standpoint, and as such, I'm not so bullish on Wissa, and I would rather just trust Newcastle and Gordon as opposed to Brentford and Wissa in this current moment. That's what the team looks like for this game week. Obviously, this involves Unai Emery as well, and I am showing you the pathway with Emery. But realistically, him or Silva this game week makes no difference given the amount of money I have in the bank. Then, moving on to game week 26, it hasn't got particularly exciting yet, but the real juice will come later down the line when I showcase the team and compare it to other chip strategies. I will move Unai Emery to Pep Guardiola. It's still the plan. I still think, obviously, City have signed a new 6. I know nothing about him. I had a little bit that he's actually quite decent and he's quite physical, and that will really help City in many regards, both in possession but obviously out of possession, and just improving their defensive transitions. Really need a lot of work at the moment. And as such, I still fancy City to potentially do something at home with all the talent they've got. And when am I ever going to get a table bonus with Manchester City? Probably never again, especially with the quality that they have. It'll be like Foden, Marmoush, De Bruyne, Haaland, the new 6, Kovacic. Maybe not all of them together, but just pretty much drop De Bruyne and that'll be the starting team, plus maybe Savio as well. And that could hurt Liverpool, right? It's just one day. So yeah, team here, again, looks strong, as you can see with the fixtures. Wissa does come into the starting lineup for Cody Gakpo because obviously I'll be betting on City, so I bench him. I also bench Konate, and Wissa has a good fixture in Leicester away. Now, Game Week 27 is the point where it will really start to get interesting. Teams will start to diverge, those who are free hitting, like myself, in Game Week 29, and those who are not, especially considering Liverpool play Newcastle. And you could argue that is certainly minimizing your upside. It really is, to an extent. They will have a lot of assets in that game, and they'll take them out as a result, potentially, and kind of just favor one side. And you'll need to offload both, especially if you're not free hitting in 29 and dead ending to Wildcard in 30. Which means that for the likes of myself, I might have a slightly suboptimal team this week. I'll have 4 players playing in the Liverpool-Newcastle game. But Isak is Isak, and he's the only striker I've seen give a really tough time to Van Dijk this season. So I'm fine with that. Salah, everyone owns him. And then there can be goals in this game. And the other thing is both of these 2 assets can hurt the other team in a multitude of ways. So I would say they individually have high floors, at least until the game takes a certain turn to favor one particular team, following one of them starting better or scoring early on. So I feel relatively comfortable with this, knowing it's slightly suboptimal, but it's still okay. And maybe there's not the ceiling there because only some people can get 3 bonus, but realistically 1. But at least there's a relatively decent floor. Burgess moves to Munoz, and he starts because, again, the defense isn't particularly strong, as you can assume. Konate, Hall play Liverpool and Newcastle. And then Rodgers moves to the bench for this fixture because I wouldn't want to play him against Munoz. I think Palace could potentially do something in that fixture, and he's obviously got the attacking returns. I'd rather play all the attackers against each other and not bench Gordon, knowing what he can do against this Liverpool side. And Liverpool's fullbacks defensively certainly can be caught out. But yeah, this will be the game week where I think teams start to diverge and people start to play in a little bit more of an aggressive manner with those not free hitting in 29. And those guys will be the ones, for example, maybe who are on slot now, and they will have a few transfers saved up because they haven't been making manager transfers and move off. Or maybe even the guys who are making manager transfers but have been keeping a lot in the locker to offload now so they can free hit in 34. Like I said, there will be even more divergence in this spot. They're not going to go, the managers who aren't going to free it in 29 aren't really going to go for Mateta in 28, because then you won't be able to field him in 29, right? Because Newcastle and Palace blank. Whereas for myself, they've obviously got a wonderful fixture in Ipswich at home, with all due respect, and I will have a Palace double up, whereas for a lot of people, it'd be difficult to do that. Obviously, they could take 5 frees into 29 and make all their moves then. I just don't think it's going to pan out that way. And those who don't have Mateta, at least, which is pretty much most of the field, especially given how the double game weeks have fallen, the landscape of things means that for me, he'll be at a very low ownership for a very good fixture. And then obviously, Liverpool, they have Southampton at home. So people will be looking to keep them, but that means they'll have to keep them through the Newcastle game. So my downside is limited in that sense because the effective ownership will be higher. So you look at the team there, you look at the fixtures, and I still think it's very strong. So I don't think I'm losing too much over 27, 28 at all. If anything, maybe I'm even in a better position compared to those who go for the different trip strategy of not free hitting in 29, which is something I looked at and will look at again before team selection. But currently, I'm just not looking to go there. Now it's FPL, right? Anything can happen over game week 27 to 28. We could well finish even with the people who commit to the other chip strategy, maybe such as yourself, and choose not to free hit in 29. Or maybe there'll be 40-point swings over both the weeks, even in each of the weeks. However, in game week 29, damn well expect to win. Because, well, and I better win given how much, not how big of a sacrifice, but I am making some form of a sacrifice to facilitate this free hit. They won't pretty much have any, or they'll have maybe a bit, but to get to Haaland will be tough. They'll have to have a lot of free transfer saved. They'll obviously have Guardiola and Foden there, great fixtures. Cunha, great fixture. Man United, great fixture. Wood, great fixture. Sells, great fixture. And then Semenyo and Kluivert, okay, fine. People will have more Bournemouth coverage, but still, maybe they won't have the double up. And even De Ligt, I like for this week. And then Haaland captain itself is like a double differential, right? So I quite like it, and I won't be losing any value as well. That's the thing. If people are moving out of Isaac, lose a lot of value, and then they'll have to buy him back on Wildcard 30. So for me, this is probably the first point of huge upside, and one of only 2 points of huge upside to go with this strategy. And then from there, maybe it tails off. But I will show you why I'm not too concerned as of now. If you look at this squad and compare it to a Wildcard squad, it's not going to be a million miles off. Okay, fine. Some people might not go Gabriel on Wildcard 30. I looked at that, and that's fine. I'll more than happily have him as an even greater differential than he already is. I think he's residing around 30-ish% EO. And my front line, again, Mateta with a really good fixture, and Isaac and Gakpo have a nice run into 33. And in general, I just like the team quite a bit. People might choose to go City on Wildcard 30, and that will be a little bit annoying that I can't get there, especially because early doors, they have Leicester on that wildcard. But, you can't have them all, and I'll have to accept that downside to an extent. But still, even double Palace defense, got that covered because I'm moving Pickford to Henderson. I should say it the other way around. Mateta for the triple up and other assets that I've discussed. And then we can move on to the next game week. But just to show you that I don't think I'm losing too much in comparison to the wildcard, I'll show you the 2 weeks where the sacrifices need to be made. Now here in 31, I'll start to roll to prepare for what is to come. Is the team optimal this week? No. It's got a 94% game week rating, which isn't bad, but people will have higher ones, especially given the wildcarding the week before. I've still got triple Newcastle away to Leicester, which is quite nice. Salah, Palmer, that's 5. Mateta, hopefully in good form. Maybe some people do and don't have Gabriel, or at least a piece of the Arsenal defense. So I can't see myself losing too much against, let's say, the template wildcard squad. I think if I am going to do so, maybe it's in the defense with the double Palace defense. But I'm okay to take that bet for now. At least Brighton away is a type of fixture where, especially considering the rivalry, Brighton at home, Henderson could potentially rack up a lot of saves and get a haul, and maybe they take well to the derby in the fight, and then Munoz hauls. I'm really reaching there, but you get the point. The team really doesn't look that bad, and that's what I'm trying to show. Now let's move on to Game Week 32. Again, could it be better? Yes. But is it bad? No, not even close. Again, a 95% rating. And the thing with this team is I have players with so many solid fundamentals. Gabriel, probably biggest box threat in the Premier League, especially for a defender. Konate plays for arguably what's been the best defense in the league this season. Okay. I guess Forest has, but one of the better defenses, the top 3 defense in the league this season. Paul, Gordon, Isaac, very, very secure picks. As FPL assets, as we've seen, Salah and Palmer. Kluivert is doing phenomenally well this season. Gakpo has been brilliant since I brought him in. Rodgers has just been gold dust for me all season. So I've got really good assets, and even if the fixtures are slightly suboptimal, they can all still perform and all have high ceilings associated. So even in 30, 31, 32, or people will be wildcarding, I don't think I'm missing out on too much, maybe Manchester City aside, and a few little iterations here and there. Game week 33, however, is where the first big sacrifice comes. I will have 13 doublers for the bench boost and 2 single game week players, which means that I already start 2 fixtures behind. Now, maybe a lot of people will have Gabriel, maybe not, and I'll only be 1 fixture behind. But where I have Robinson, I can imagine a lot of people having Hosco Gvardiol, and it probably just wouldn't make sense for me to go there unless I really look to play quite defensive and cover myself. But in total, that would be, I think, a -8 over the 2 weeks. So I'd really be starting behind the 8 ball. So I probably wouldn't do that. But in terms of the rest of the team, if you assume everyone else doubles, I think it's quite solid. I mean, Liverpool have a wonderful double. Newcastle will have a pretty decent one. Chelsea will have quite a decent one. That's why I've got Sanchez there as well. Jorgensen at the time, it's Jorgensen. The downside to this is there's no Man United, which isn't that big of a deal, but there's no Bruno Fernandes, and I would certainly like him. And again, there's no Manchester City. That was one thing that I hadn't discussed until now, is that if you are to go wildcard 30, you could facilitate Haaland. I looked at it. I still think it's very difficult to get all of these guys in. Salah, Palmer, Isak, Haaland, because you'll probably want all of them. And maybe you just forego Haaland to make sure the rest of your squad is strong. But in general, I won't have any City coverage for this double game week. Should it fall here, which it very likely will, as things stand. And that's not great, but I don't think it's the biggest sacrifice to make, given I've still got very solid assets elsewhere. This is the first game week that I'd say I'm definitely down. 30 to 32 compared to 27 to 28. I guess we'll just have to see how it plays out. I guess in terms of expected points, the swing shouldn't be too big, however, given that my team and probably other teams will be very strong, irrespective of strategy. We saw in that slide that I did go KO to Sanchez, and I arrived with 3 free transfers, which means I will have the same in game week 34. So what moves have I made for this blank game week where other people will be free hitting? Gakpo to Cunha, Palmer to Mbeumo, Kluivert to Iwobi. Now you look at this, right? I've got triple Newcastle, which everyone will probably have on a free hit. I have Cunha, who everyone will probably have on a free hit. Likewise, Robinson and Iwobi, potentially maybe another different Fulham attacker. That's already 6 players. Mbeumo, again, I can imagine being very popular, 7. Likewise with Gabriel, 8. Fine, they might go like triple Brighton against West Ham instead of my Palace. And yeah, that's probably more optimal. But for the upside presented in Game Week 29, considering I will genuinely might be able to get 8, 9, 10, 11 different players, including a captain, compared to just the 3 here. And that too, Palace can hurt them. They could. And you know what? Even if they lose, at least Mateta and Munoz have the attacking upside to them, whereby even if they lose, they can get a return here or there and just soften the blow. And Brighton or Bournemouth, Brighton or Brentford, whoever they bet on, apologies, they still have to go and perform, right? So I don't think this is that bad. I think there's limited downside here, and I still haven't taken a hit. For all of this, I won't have to take 1 hit, which I like quite a bit as well. So if you look at the, I'd say, upside in 29, it's significantly better than that in 34. It's just whether or not I'm capturing enough upside in maybe 27, 28, which doesn't look to be the case, compared to 30 to 33, including the bench boost, whereby it's going to offset that. But I don't just gain in 29, I also gain 35 and onwards. So having looked at some of the fixture projections, this is just some early thoughts surrounding a Game Week 35 wildcard, which would be my strategy. A lot of people will probably wildcard in 30 and look to just roll, and they'll have 4 or 5 free transfers by this time. So that's what I'll be competing against. So I guess most of them should get to Erling Haaland, especially if he has an attractive Game Week 36 double and has good fixtures towards the end of the season. However, it's not a guarantee that they're able to get there. Maybe other 5s, maybe things pop up along the way, kind of always do. I imagine that will happen with my plan as well. And maybe they can't get to triple Manchester City, which I'm like the look of. Everton defense is very attractive. Maybe they can get to 1 but not 2, which is something I'm looking at. Those guys might all have Gabriel, triple Liverpool, and then want to ditch the rest of Liverpool aside from Salah. You might want to ditch Palmer and maybe a couple more assets, right? So using all of those free transfers, even if they got to a relatively similar team to myself, it wouldn't be as optimal. And they wouldn't have any free transfers left. However, and the thing is about not having any free transfers left is you might have to adjust again for 36 and again for 37. But at some point, you'll be sub. You pretty much have to be, unless it goes perfectly. Which means that when it gets to the Game Week 38, and there is a slight fixture swing compared to 35 to 37 to 38, I'll have 3 frees. And I think that's a decent opportunity to attack, especially given how things always unfold on the last day. Now, I am not saying that this strategy is better than the other strategy, right? It's just what's currently working for my team. And I do think it's good enough where I can justify it to you and justifiably go there. So I just wanted to present both sides, and I didn't think I was particularly biased. I guess I'm naturally a little bit higher on my strategy, otherwise I wouldn't be going there. But that's how I see things at the moment. Those are the pros and cons to it. That's the practical application to my team. Now you should be able to take it to your team easier. And I hope that helped. And that is all she wrote for this video, ladies and gentlemen. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, let's just try and get this video to 450 likes. Leave your questions in the comments below. And do subscribe as we push for 7,000 subscribers. Thank you very much for all of your support. I'm still yet to get back to some of the comments from the video where I made my appearance on the Premier League. But I will be doing so. And like I said in the last episode, thank you very, very much for all of that support. I shall see you very soon for everything you need to know. In the meantime, enjoy your weekend. Goodbye.